months ago, several of us filled out the spiritual gifts inventory. Now, this is the same tool that many of us filled out when I first came to St. Francis almost 6 years ago. It's valuable in many ways, I would say. But this particular version has a couple of statements that people just don't know how to rank. You may remember. And that tends to skew the results. One of those two statements is about hospitality. And this is what it says. I am often asked to open my home for small group gatherings or social occasions. You remember that one? And we are asked to decide if that statement is true for us, more or less, or maybe not at all. Now, I can think of a few people for whom this would be true, and we are grateful for those people among us. But it also has to do with our reputation, doesn't it? It's about whether or not people know that we like to host gatherings in our home. And there may be many reasons why we feel that we can't. It can be expensive. We also may feel that proper hosting requires a spotless house and great food and scintillating conversation, which may seem overwhelming at times. Or maybe you don't have much energy for that deep cleaning. Or you have unpredictable animals or kids. Or maybe you don't get off work until late and it's just too much to handle. Or maybe, like some of us, you still have a room or a corner of a room or a garage that is still filled with boxes from your last move. And how long ago was that? These days, we tend to eat at our own homes, or when money and time permit, at a restaurant. But in Jesus' day, and especially on the Sabbath, it was common to have an invitation from someone else to join them for the main Sabbath meal. The meal we hear about today is hosted by a leader of the Pharisees, who obviously doesn't purchase the food or cook or clean himself. This man invites Jesus, whom he doesn't know well. But along with his other guests, they are watching Jesus closely. They just can't predict how he'll act. And sure enough, Jesus makes one of those remarks as the meal is beginning. He pulls out one of those parables that are meant to make people think and behave differently. Now, the Roman Empire was a shame-honor culture. If you were higher on the ladder of wealth and birth and success, you pretty much know where to sit when you came to a special dinner like this. You would receive the honor that was due to you. But now Jesus is pointing out that there may be someone more distinguished than you are, who should occupy the more honored position. So the best decision would be to sit in a lowly place. And then you might be invited to move up. But this parable is not a story about good manners. And it isn't a story about maintaining the one-up, one-down culture of the Romans. Do you know how I figured that out? It's one key sentence. For all who exalt or lift themselves up will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted or lifted up. Lifted up can mean being asked to move to the head of the table, or it can literally mean being lifted up from the earth, as on a cross. Jesus is the one who truly humbles himself. He is the pre-existing one who was born into our flesh, who walks in dusty sandals, who eats the food that others offer him. And he will be exalted on a cross, that Roman instrument of torture. But no one else knows these things. He just sounds like someone who has no idea how social position works. And no doubt, they've gone from watching him closely to shaking their heads at the disruption his presence causes. Jesus isn't satisfied to just address the guests, though. He now turns to the man who invited him. He's an equal opportunity offender. Jesus knows that the people who have been invited, for the most part, are the host's peers. And he has been invited as a rabbi, a teacher, a curiosity even. Maybe one who will say something outrageous and entertain the others. When you give a luncheon or a dinner, Jesus says, don't invite those people who are your peers, who are your family, who will return the invitation the next week as soon as the food can be purchased and the servants made to prepare it. No. Invite people who don't know where their next meal is coming from, who don't have a house to clean, who will give thanks to God because all gifts come from God. And God will bless you because they can't repay you. There's no quid pro quo in the kingdom of God. No something given for something else. As theologian Caroline Lewis says about this text. And then here comes Jesus, who basically says, yeah, that whole quid pro quo thing, that's not going to fly in the kingdom of God. And why, we might ask Jesus? Well, let me tell you why, says Jesus. The problem with a quid pro quo mentality is quantification. How do you measure or calculate repayment of love, of mercy, of forgiveness? And the fact that we think we can is a rather striking theological problem. We tend to forget that our beliefs about faith and discipleship are also claims about who we think God is, she continues. If we insist that our faith, our salvation, is dependent upon an equal rate of exchange between God and us, then we need to ask ourselves, in what kind of God do we believe? What happens if we don't measure up? And what makes us think we can assume certain systems to quantify the grace of God? For a few minutes, I'd like us to focus on the times when we received an unmerited blessing, something we didn't earn. And I'll invite you to share in just a minute if you happen to think of one. But I'll start, and this is recent. A friend of mine called me on the day before Perry and I left for Sacramento in Mara's ordination. We talked for a while, and then she said, I'm not going to be driving anymore. I just can't. But I have this car, and I'm wondering if you would like it. I said, wow, sure. Can we pay you something for it? And she said, no, I don't really need the money. And Perry and I were overwhelmed. He'd been working hard on getting Ren's car repaired so that we could take it to her on our way to Sacramento. So we planned to stop at my friend's house on our way out of town the next day to take her a little gift, which couldn't begin to repay her very generous gift to us. So Perry and I left about noon. We drove to Eureka, where she lives. And about 2 blocks from her house, Ren's car died. We couldn't believe it. Perry thought that it might be something that he could repair, most likely, but not then. So we walked to her house and we told her what had happened. And she gave us the keys to her car. As we left Eureka, I called our insurance company and had them added to our insurance. We had Ren's car towed to our house, where Lyndon was staying with the animals. And we thanked God for this unbelievable, timely blessing. Does anybody else have a story of blessing to share? Something you didn't earn, but was definitely a time that God cared for you. Anybody? Bobby?
I hope everybody can hear me. There was a flood in Santa Rosa. Not the last one that happened that was real anyway, we lived out by the Russian River, and we had to evacuate, and our house was flooded. And actually, more than one person offered to take us in, so we were going to go to a motel. And the neighbors that lived next door to us, they had a house in Santa Rosa, and they had offered, but someone else from my husband's work, one of his co-workers, invited us to come and stay with them, and also his boss did. So that was 3 different families that offered to take us in. You wouldn't hear of us going to a motel. So we ended up going to the co-worker's house, and he had a wife and 2 kids, and they lived in the next town down from, I guess, Roner Park is where they live. Next town down from Santa Rosa. And for at least 3 weeks, they took us in as part of their family, and they made our dinner. They wouldn't take any money for the meals or anything, and they just acted like we were their aunt and uncle or their brother and sister. And then Steve, when he had time after work and on weekends, he would go, after they were able to, back to our house and work on getting it all cleaned up again. Anyway, these people found out that our mailbox had floated away. So at the very end of all this generosity, they gave us a mailbox. So I thought that was, they had a burden on their heart from God, probably, just the way they were raised. They were good Catholic, and that was really a blessing.
Thank you, Bonnie. So the story about flooding and your coworkers helped you out for a few weeks and gave you a mailbox. Yes, Brent.
Many of you know, I don't drive anymore. So Saturday, I was doing policy deals and arranging the fund. And I had told my son, he works great, he said, don't worry about picking me up, I'll drive home. So I was about ready to leave and thinking, oh, gosh, I'm so tired. I don't want to walk home. And who should come by the church but Tanera? And she says, can I help you finish? And I said, oh, just in time. Did you give me a ride home? So that as many times as someone gave me a ride, either to church, to my house.
That's a great story.
That's great.
So you're blessed with
Well,
the
just like
message.
a sign I brought from the church. Watch out.
Anybody else? Okay. Well, I will close with a story. Brian McLaren, in his book, The Secret Message of Jesus, tells a true story about author and teacher Tony Campolo. I don't know if you've heard of Tony before. Apparently, there was a time when Tony was traveling. He was in another time zone and he couldn't sleep. So well after midnight, he wandered down to a donut shop where it turns out local prostitutes also hung out through the night. There, he overheard a conversation between 2 of them. One named Agnes said, "You know what? Tomorrow's my birthday. I'm going to be 39. Her friend snapped back. "So what do you want from me? A birthday party? Huh? You want me to get you a cake and sing happy birthday?" Agnes replied, "Aw, come on. Why do you have to be so mean? Why do you have to put me down? I'm just saying it's my birthday. I don't want anything from you. I mean, why should I have a birthday party? I've never had a birthday party in my whole life. Why should I have one now? When they left, Tony got an idea. He asked the shop owner if Agnes came in every night, and when he answered yes, Tony invited him into a surprise party conspiracy. The shop owner's wife even got involved. Together, they arranged for a cake, candles, and typical party decorations for Agnes, who was to Tony a complete stranger. The next night, when she came in, they shouted, "Surprise!" and Agnes couldn't believe her eyes. The donut shop patrons sang, and she began to cry so hard she could barely blow out the candles. When the time came to cut the cake, she asked if they'd mind if she didn't cut it, if she could bring it home, just to keep it for a while and savor the moment. So she left, carrying her cake like a treasure. Tony led the guests in a prayer for Agnes, after which the shop owner told Tony he didn't realize Tony was a preacher. He asked what kind of church Tony came from, and Tony replied, "I belong to a church that throws birthday parties for prostitutes at 3:30 in the morning." The shop owner couldn't believe it. "No, you don't. There ain't no church like that. If there was, I'd join it." "Yep, I'd join a church like that," he said. So Tony was blessed because Agnes couldn't repay him. Oh, she could have bought a cake and sung happy birthday to herself, but that's not a party. As we think about the many ways we are blessed and the ways we share blessings with those who can't repay them, let's don't forget that we are offered the banquet of Christ Himself when we gather on a Sunday. That party is called the Eucharist, or Holy Communion. It's Christ's real presence in the bread and wine, His own body and blood for us. The one who humbled Himself that He might be exalted. The one who, in the words from our second lesson from Hebrews, is the same yesterday and today and forever. And so we are blessed.